While some people are purchasing their first properties, moving directly from home, there's a significant amount of people that are moving in from a situation where they have been a tenant, which usually means that they paid some kind of a deposit to the landlord, which is due back to them once they vacate the property. With all the costs that are involved in buying a property, the return of this deposit can really be essential. And should the landlord or the rental agent not give it back, it can really throw a dent in your finances and throw you off course. So today we're going to look at 6 ways that will ensure that you get your full deposit back as you transition from tenancy to home ownership. Should there be any hiccups along the way, whether the landlord or the rental agent is being particularly shady, I will guide you through the legal process to help you get your money back. I'm Sibolelo Makwanyane, aka Sibolelo the estate agent, and welcome to the channel where we discuss all things real estate, particularly for first-time home buyers and first-time home owners. Subscribe if you want regular updates on this type of topic, and go ahead and click the notification bell so you don't miss a video every time it's loaded. The refund of the security deposit is of much contention between landlord and tenant. If you take into account the fact that it could be up to 3 months worth of your rent, getting this money back can really help with things like moving costs or maybe adding that extra little touch in your new home, perhaps a new couch or converting some of the carpets into tiles. So the purpose of the deposit is to protect the landlord from loss. Period. All other reasons center around that. Should the tenant damage anything or not pay utilities or simply just default on the rent, the landlord will make no loss and will not be inconvenienced. More often than not, you will be required to put down 1 month's worth of rent as deposit, but more and more we're seeing landlords and real estate agents requiring 2 or even 3 months worth of rent. As the number of defaults in rent increases, so we're seeing more and more deposit being required. And that is basically to mitigate the risk that the landlord has to take. Whether you're required to put down a deposit of 1 month or more will depend on the requirements of the landlord or the leasing agent. There are also times when the higher deposit will be requested if they feel that the leaseholder has got a specifically low score or is a high risk in any way. Once there's an agreement with the number of months for the deposit, usually the deposit is paid before you move in, and ideally the landlord is supposed to take this money and deposit it into an interest-bearing account, and then when you vacate the property, you get your deposit back as well as the interest. But landlords seldom return the deposit with the interest and sometimes don't even return the deposit at all. And while you've got no control of whether or not your landlord is a douchebag, there are certain actions that you can take in order to make sure that he's got no leg to stand on should he try and hold your deposit. The first thing you can do is create a snag list. Now, even though you'll only get your deposit back once you move out, whether or not you get it back actually has a lot to do with what happens when you move in. Upon taking occupation, do a thorough walkthrough with your agent or landlord in order to make sure that everything is in working order. So you're basically looking for any existing damage, any defects. So this might be things like cracks in the walls, leaks in the ceiling, carpet stains on the floor, door handles that are missing or damaged, anything that looks out of place. All of these snags need to be noted and preferably photographed as proof of the condition of the property when you moved in. So ideally we want a description as well as a visual image. The estate agent will then create a snag list, which she gives to the landlord. Please make sure that you get a copy of this document as well. Once you've moved in, you've got 7 days to add any other defects that you might have only picked up once you'd moved in. If you're using a reputable estate agent, this snag list will happen quite automatically. But if you're renting directly from the landlord, it's very easy to try and skip this step, and that is very dangerous. And that's because these details could be the deciding factor between whether or not you get your full deposit back. If there's there's something on the snag list that the landlord says he's going to fix, note that as well. So that if after a short period it breaks again, then you've got paper trail to say that probably it was not fixed at the root. So basically the purpose of a snag list is to compare what the property looked like when you moved in compared to when you're moving out in order to avoid disputes. Once you are in the property, it really is in your best interest to keep the property in good living condition. Report any issues that need to be attended to in order to avoid deterioration. So say, for example, there's a big storm and one of the tiles on the roof moves. So now the water comes through, and every time it rains, you can hear the water landing on the ceiling. Report it immediately, otherwise it becomes white noise, and by the time you want to vacate the property, there's now damage on the ceiling because there's this mucky, moldy stuff there. At the exit inspection, the photos are now going to reveal that the ceiling was not moldy when you moved in. And now there is a tug of war between you and the landlord because he's saying it's your fault, you saying it's not, and he's saying it was not there when you moved in, so he doesn't want to return your deposit. And it could have all been avoided if you had just reported it at the time of the incident. During your tenancy, be sure to pay particular attention to areas that are prone to damage because of dirt buildup. So this is things like kitchens, bathrooms, carpets. Be sure to clean up as soon as the mess is made. And maybe you want to get something like an area rug in order to protect the carpets from being stained and maybe cigarette burns. The third thing you can do to ensure you get your full deposit back is to give notice before moving out. Smash the like button if you're enjoying this content, and go ahead and join the family by subscribing. If there is a lease in place, the landlord always knows that next month's rent is sorted. In fact, one of the reasons why the deposit is demanded is to make sure that the property is always let. So if you want to move out early, make sure you give sufficient notice. Usually that's 2 months, but just make sure that you read your contract and see what it says. When you do give notice, make sure that it's in writing and try and get the landlord or agent to send a confirmation that they have received your notice. If you vacate randomly or just absquander, you are now in breach and the landlord can keep your deposit. Once you have handed in your notice, the landlord or agent is going to need to bring people to come and view. Don't make everyone's life difficult here. Just make the property accessible so the potential agents are able to come and assess the property. The problem with undermining this issue is that, say you were difficult about letting people come and view, so now the property is vacant after you moved out and the landlord feels as though he's entitled to keep your deposit. Maybe you're thinking, well, that's not my problem. He has no right to hold on to my deposit. And technically, you're probably right. But if he does, you now spend weeks chasing after him. You're wasting your airtime. It's affecting your blood pressure. And every day that you have to chase after him is a day that you don't have your deposit, which really could have been avoided if you had just played your part. Personally, I'm not a fighter. I just don't see the point in putting up roadblocks in your way just to try and see if you can bash them down. So just let the people come and view. The landlord gets his tenants, aka his money. You get what's rightfully yours, aka your deposit, and everyone is happy. One of the reasons why the landlord does not return your deposit on the day that you move out is because he needs time to go through his paperwork and whatnot and make sure that you are not leaving him with a big bill. It's not unusual for a tenant to think that they can use their deposit as payment for the last month's rent. If you've been staying in a property for, let's say, 6 years, when you moved in, the rent was, let's say, 7,000 Rand, which means that was your deposit. By the time you move out, the rent might have escalated to 10,000 or beyond. So obviously, the deposit is not going to suffice for the landlord. And remember, we said that the deposit is to protect the landlord from loss. So make sure that your last month's rent is paid, as well as all outstanding utilities, to ensure that the landlord or leasing agent gives you back your full deposit. Number 6 is to make sure that you pay attention at the exit inspection. So the purpose of the exit inspection is to make sure that the tenant leaves the property in the same condition that he found it, and that the next tenant moves into a fully functioning home. If you have taken your notes and your photographs, maybe even videos, you will be able to present it to the landlord or agent in case there's a dispute. The Rental Housing Act allows for moderate deterioration and depreciation. Now, you can imagine if you've been living in the same house for 6 years, there's bound to be some general wear and tear. This might be something like fading on the carpets in an area where there's a lot of traffic, or maybe faded paint on the walls. Those are examples of wear and tear. The better you are at taking care of the property during your tenancy, and obviously the more accurate you are when it comes to the ingoing inspection, the more likely you are to get your full deposit back, provided of course you didn't, damage anything on the property. A gigantic stain on the carpets from when you knocked over a bottle of wine is not wear and tear. Holes in the wall that you drill to put up your big screen TV, that is not wear and tear. The idea, as mentioned, is to return the property in the same condition you found it. If you've gone and painted a feature wall in the lounge or one of the bedrooms, you need to restore it by painting it the same color it was when you found it. I had a tenant who once painted the ceiling peach. It was an open plan setup, so it was like the kitchen, the lounge, the dining area, and I was just like, babe, best you fix that. It's very important to attend this exit inspection because by you not pitching, by default, you are acknowledging that if there is any damage on the property, you're taking responsibility for that. And also the landlord can then decide whether or not he returns your deposit. If the landlord or agent doesn't pitch, they are thus saying that the property is in good condition and then they must return your full deposit. So what happens if there is damage to the property? Any defects that are a result of negligence or misuse, you will then forfeit whatever amount it costs to restore the property back to its original value. So while it should be a two-way conversation, it's often easier for the landlord or agent to bully the tenant because they've got the upper hand, aka the deposit. Once you've had your exit inspection, the amount of time that it takes for the landlord to return your deposit will depend on the outcome of the exit inspection. If all is well and the landlord and tenant both agree that the property is in the same condition that it was when the tenant moved in, then the landlord has to return the deposit within 7 days. If there is damage on the property, then it's 14 days. And should you not pitch for the inspection, that time span extends to 21 days for the landlord to return whatever amount of the deposit he feels you're entitled to. If you feel the landlord or leasing agent are being unfair or unreasonable, you can turn to the Rental Housing Tribunal for assistance. They basically offer their services for close to nothing, so don't let money deter you. If you don't get joy here, you can always go to the small claims court as long as the amount is less than 20,000 Rand. So this needs to be one whole amount of less than 20,000. You can't say he's got 2 months deposit and each of them is 13,000 Rand because then that counts as 26 because it is one lump sum of 26 and not two separate amounts of 13 and 13. As soon as you make that decision that you want to move from tenant to homeowner, it's very important to know that there are going to be transfer costs involved in the purchase of your property. So here's a video that will help you understand all about those upfront costs, as well as how to calculate how much you're going to need. I'll catch you in the next video.